Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for July 15th of 2023, and currently there is a slight risk for eastern New Mexico into western Texas in the Texas Panhandle, as well as a marginal threat around that does extend into central Colorado and north central Texas as well as a marginal threat for the eastern United States coast. It does extend across western New York and as far south as northern Georgia and across eastern Tennessee, eastern Kentucky, and the majority of Ohio. So that's a pretty large area across the eastern coast to cover, as well as a slight risk back towards the high plains. As for our threats for today, we do have a 2% tornado threat for either location, one more so back towards the slight risk region, and one towards the northern region of that marginal threat across the eastern coast. And then as for our wind threat, we do have a 15% with the high significant region for that slight risk region. So we could definitely see the possibility of a destructive outflow gust today, as well as a 5% around that, and a 5% for that marginal threat region back towards the eastern coast. And then as for our hail threat, we do have a 15% with a 5% around that with the hatch significant region. So we could see the possibility of large hail. And then back towards the eastern coast, we do have a 5% for that marginal threat. So overall, our main threats might be the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes, and the possibility of large hail and destructive outflow gusts back towards the slight risk region. And then for the eastern coast, our main threats will likely be the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes, and the possibility of some isolated small to medium hail, and the possibility of some isolated damaging gusts. Taking a look at our pivotal weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars like we usually do, you can see that we do have a fairly broad area of mid-level flow. This is a very large jet stream, and for that marginal threat across the eastern coast, you can see that very broad jet stream, it is pretty weak for today in that particular region with mid-level flow in the 30 knots and 20 knots. However, this very broad region of mid-level flow will allow for the possibility of a little bit of speed shear and the possibility of somewhat elongated photographs, which will lead to the possibility of some isolated small hail with the instability that we have. And then you can see the change in direction here with the low pressure system back towards Canada. That's going to give it a change in direction to allow for the possibility of some weak directional shear back towards that 2% tornado threat region in Pennsylvania and New York. So that broad area of mid-level flow is going to be the main trigger for severe weather development in that marginal threat across the eastern coast. And then back towards the slight risk region in the high plains, you can see that we don't really have all that fairly strong mid-level flow. It is on the outside of the jet stream, sort of. However, there are some lingering outflow boundaries in this region in particular. So because it's outside of the area of mid-level flow, those outflow boundaries that are in place are going to help trigger severe weather development in that slight risk region. However, some fairly weak but definitely sufficient mid-level flow could allow for the possibility of some elongated photographs and the possibility of some large hail. Taking a look at our dew points, starting off the slight risk region back towards the high plains, you can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points in place. We have dew points that are reaching the mid to upper 60s, as well as the possibility of some low 70s up in that region. So we could see the possibility of some fairly strong instability depending on our lapse rates, possibly getting up to the 3000s as well as the upper moderates. And then back towards the marginal threat region across the eastern coast, you can see that we do have some fairly strong dew points as well, more so compared to the slight risk region in the high plains. We have dew points that are reaching the mid to upper 60s, as well as the widespread low 70s, possibly the mid 70s as well. So with whatever lapse rates we have, we could definitely see the possibility of some fairly strong instability, possibly getting up to the upper moderates as well, depending on our lapse rates. However, it does appear that the strong moisture content in the atmosphere, it is expected to stay ahead of the cluster of cells that do develop with the broad area of mid-level flow. So we could definitely see some widespread moderate Cape values that will keep storms going for quite a long time, possibly into the overnight hours. And then taking a look at our lapse rates, starting off with the slight risk region in the high plains, you can see that we do have some fairly strong but more so moderate lapse rates in place. We have lapse rates that are in the 6s and 7s and maybe even the low 8s. However, they are mostly in isolated areas, so they are probably going to stay mostly around the 6s and 7s, possibly getting up to the upper 7s as well. And with the dew points that we have, we could definitely see some really strong instability, possibly getting up to the mid 3000s. And then back towards the marginal threat across the eastern coast, you can see that we don't have fairly strong lapse rates, which is expected for this region in particular. Because of how much tree cover is in this region in particular, particular, it makes it hard for strong lapse rates to develop, so overall weak lapse rate is going to lead to the possibility of much more moderate instability, possibly getting around the 1000s to upper 2000s range, maybe even the isolated 3000s as well. And then taking a look at our instability with our given dew points and our given lapse rates, let's start off with the slight risk region that is in the high plains. You can see that we do have some fairly strong instability in place. We have Cape values that are reaching the 3000s as well as the mid and upper 2000s and even into the mid 3000s. We could definitely see the possibility of some destructive outflow gusts with strong instability like this and our strong lapse rates. And with our strong lapse rates as well, we could definitely see the possibility of some large hail with overall weak mid-level flow and some slightly elongated photographs. And then with whatever directional shear we have, we could definitely see the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes. And then back towards the marginal threat in the eastern coast, you can see that we do have some widespread moderate instability, more so in the 1000s to 2000s, 2500 range, as well as the isolated 3000s as well. So we could see the possibility of some damaging outflow gusts, as well as the possibility of maybe some isolated small hail, with some overall weak mid-level flow and some slightly elongated photographs. And with whatever directional shear back towards the New York and Pennsylvania region, we could see the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes. And then taking a look at our bulk shear, you can see starting off with the slight risk region, where there is a significant threat for some large hail and the possibility of a 2% tornado threat. You can see that we do have some fairly strong wind shear in place where that slight risk region is, which wasn't too expected with a weak overall mid-level flow aloft in this particular location. However, some strong speed shear and the possibility of some weak directional shear mixed in with that, we could definitely see the possibility of some elongated photographs in this particular location. So we could definitely see the possibility of some large hail and the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes, but I will go into more detail about our directional shear on our storm relative helicity. And then back towards the marginal threat along the eastern coast in the Ohio Valley, you can see that we do have some overall weak bulk shear and some overall weak speed shear with overall weak mid-level flow aloft. You can see that some isolated speed shear in place could definitely allow for the possibility of some isolated small hail. However, some of this could be some directional shear with a change in direction and our 2% tornado threat. So this could be a mixture of our directional shear and our speed shear, and we could see the possibility of, again, some isolated small hail and the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes. Taking a look at our storm relative helicity and our directional shear, you can see starting off with the slight risk region back in the high plains, you can see that we do have some overall fairly weak but definitely sufficient for a 2% tornado threat directional shear back in that slight risk region. You can see that ahead of outflow boundaries. I do not have my drawing tool. I do not know what's happening with it. It's just not working on my computer anymore, so I can't really pinpoint the exact location of it, but I can kind of pinpoint it with my cursor here. You can see it right there, that area along outflow boundaries here. You can see a small region of some definitely sufficient for a 2% tornado threat directional shear in place. So again, we could see the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes back in that slight risk region. However, taking a look at the marginal threat along the eastern coast with that 2% tornado threat, focus on the 2% tornado threat along the New York and Pennsylvania region. It is a little cluttered in this region with some wind shear in the triple digits and some weak 100s, so it is a little bit cluttered. However, you can see in that 2% tornado threat region, there is overall more concentrated and stronger directional shear in place in the 100s, in the 140 to 150 meters squared to second squared. So we could see the possibility of one or two brief tornadoes with our given instability in that particular region with our directional shear. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator. Join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. And if you live in any of the areas that covered for severe weather for today, please stay weather alert for the time being, and hopefully I will be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.